When Roman legions crushed Queen Zenobia's army outside Antioch in 272 CE, her generals expected execution. What came instead was far more calculated. Rome had perfected something darker than death.
Oh.
The art of breaking rulers while keeping them alive, transforming defiant monarchs into living monuments to imperial power. For women who wore crowns, defeat meant facing a brutality designed not merely to punish, but to erase dignity itself. Under Roman law, war captives existed in a legal void that stripped them of every protection afforded to citizens. The principle known as jus gentium, the law of nations, held that war defeat transformed free people into property. Once a city fell or an army surrendered, its inhabitants became legally enslaved, all of them, regardless of their former status. Queen commanded no more legal standing than the lowest soldier in her defeated army. This wasn't just harsh. It was deliberate legal architecture. Roman citizens possessed rights that shielded them from certain punishments. To flog a Roman citizen was scandalous. To execute one without trial sparked outrage. But foreign captives held no such protections. They could be mistreated, displayed, sold, or killed at the discretion of their captors. Roman law made no exceptions for gender, none for nobility. The 12 Tables, Rome's earliest legal code from the 5th century BCE, established these principles with brutal clarity. Prisoners taken in war became property of the Roman state or were distributed among soldiers. Women off royal lineage discovered that their former power meant nothing once chains replaced their crowns. Documented this reality when he described the treatment of defeated British royalty, noting that Roman officials showed no hesitation in violating those who had once commanded armies and administered justice. Female captives faced additional vulnerability. Roman military culture, forged through centuries of conquest, regarded captured women as spoils of war. The line between prisoner of war and slave existed on line paper. Practice, defeat dissolved all former status, leaving captive queens vulnerable to treatment that would have been unthinkable had they possessed Roman citizenship. The Roman triumph transformed military victory into theater, and captive royalty served as the centerpiece. When a general received permission from the Senate to celebrate a triumph, preparations began for a display that would parade Rome's dominance through the streets for all to witness. The route stretched from the Field of Mars through the Forum, and up to the Capitoline Hill, nearly 4 kilometers of crowded thoroughfares. These processions followed a carefully choreographed order designed to maximize psychological impact. Musicians and entertainers led the parade. Then came carts, bearing paintings and models of conquered cities. Wild animals from exotic territories were led in chains, offering Romans a glimpse of the unknown world their legions had subdued. Then came the prisoners of war. Walking in shackles at the heart of the spectacle, captive rulers marched at the front of the prisoner column, their royal garments often left intact to emphasize the magnitude of their fall. Queens who had commanded, armies now shuffled in chains before crowds that jeered and celebrated their humiliation. The contrast was deliberate by displaying monarchs in their full regalia while bound and powerless. Rome communicated a message that resonated far beyond the city walls. No kingdom stood beyond reach. No throne guaranteed safety. For female captives of royal blood, the triumph meant enduring the gaze of thousands while stripped of all dignity. The journey typically took an entire day. Procession moved slowly to allow spectators along the route to observe every detail. Captive queens walked this gauntlet, knowing their fate hung in the balance. Some would survive the day, others would not see sunset. The uncertainty itself served as torture, forcing the defeated to contemplate their approaching doom with every step through streets lined with Romans celebrating. Queen Zenobia of Palmyra had carved out an empire that stretched from Egypt to Anatolia, challenging Roman authority across the east. When Emperor Aurelian finally crushed her forces in 272 CE and captured the queen as she fled towards Persia, he gained more than a military victory. He acquired the perfect symbol for his upcoming triumph. The Historia Augusta, written in the 4th century, provides detailed descriptions of Zenobia's appearance in Aurelian's triumphal procession of 274 CE, the account likely drawing on eyewitness testimony. Describes a spectacle designed to overwhelm observers with its opulence and cruelty. Zenobia was adorned with jewels that caught the sunlight, transforming her into a glittering monument to Rome's power over the wealthiest kingdoms of the East. But it was the chains that drew the most attention. These were not simple iron shackles. Zenobia walked bound in heavy golden chains, so massive that guards marched beside her to help bear their weight. The choice of gold was deliberate. These chains symbolized thievery wealth she had commanded, now turned into the instrument of her bondage. Her entire person had become a walking display of conquered riches. Ancient sources note that Zenobia maintained remarkable composure throughout the ordeal. Despite the weight of the golden chains and the hours of slow marching through hostile crowds, she carried herself with dignity. This very defiance may have saved her life, Aurelian impressed, perhaps by her bearing or calculating that her continued existence served his purposes better than her death, spared Zenobia the execution that awaited most captive rulers. Instead, he granted her a villa near Rome, where she lived out her remaining years. Some accounts claim she married a Roman senator and became part of aristocratic society, daughters marrying into noble families. Whether this represented mercy or a more subtle form of humiliation remains debated. Zenobia spent her final decades as a living reminder of Rome's power, her presence in Italian society, a constant demonstration that even the mightiest queens could be reduced to Roman dependence. In 60 CE, when King Progus of the Iceni died, he left a will designed to protect his kingdom and family. He bequeathed half his territory to Emperor Nero and half to his two daughters, hoping this compromise would preserve Annian independence. While satisfying Roman demands, the strategy failed catastrophically. Roman officials led by imperial procurator Danis Cotus ignored the will entirely. They seized all Anni lands and property, declaring the entire kingdom forfeit. When Queen Boudica protested this violation, she faced punishment that demonstrated how little protection royal status afforded defeated rulers. Tacitus, whose father-in-law Agricola served in Britain during this period, recorded what followed. With unusual directness for ancient historians discussing such matters, Boudica was publicly flogged. The flogging alone represented a profound violation. To beat a Roman citizen required legal justification and procedural safeguards. To flog a queen of an allied kingdom constituted an act of deliberate humiliation. But the Romans went further. Boudica's daughters, likely teenagers and certainly unmarried, were violated by Roman soldiers. Tacitus describes these assaults with sparse language that conveys his own horror at events that violated even Roman sensibilities about acceptable conduct. The historian places these crimes at the center of his explanation for the rebellion that followed. The abuse was not random violence. It was calculated aggregation designed to break the royal family and demonstrate Roman dominance over the Iceni. The public nature of these crimes multiplied their impact. This was not violence committed in secret, but humiliation performed before the Anni people. By abusing the royal family in front of their subjects, Roman officials sent a message about the fate awaiting those who questioned imperial authority. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Rather than crushing resistance, the abuse of the royal family ignited a rebellion that nearly drove Rome from Britain. Boudica raised an army that destroyed 3 Roman cities, including Londinium, massacring tens of thousands of Roman citizens and their allies. Tacitus preserves a speech he attributes to Boudica, in which she declares that she fights not as a queen seeking to preserve her kingdom, but as a woman avenging her abused body and the violated honor of her daughters. The rebellion ended in defeat at an unknown battlefield where Roman discipline and tactical positioning overcame the far larger British forces. Tacitus claims Boudica poisoned herself rather than face capture. The fate of her daughters goes unrecorded. They vanish from historical accounts after the initial violation, their stories lost to silence. As triumphal processions wound through Rome toward the Capitoline Hill, captive rulers knew their journey might end at the Mamertine prison, known in Latin as the Tullianum. This ancient structure built into the northeastern slope of the Capitol line served as the final stop for Rome's most notable enemies. while the triumph continued to the temple of Jupiter, where the victorious general would make offerings. Condemned prisoners were led aside. The Tullineum consisted of 2 levels. The upper chamber served as a holding cell, but the lower dungeon, accessible only through a hole in the ceiling, became the execution chamber. Here, in darkness and filth, Rome's enemies met their end. The method varied. Some were strangled, others were left to starve. The process remained deliberately hidden from public view, occurring while crowds celebrated on the streets above. Varink, the GIC chieftain who had unified the tribes of Gaul against Julius Caesar, exemplified this fate. After his defeat at Alesia, in 52 CE, Caesar held him in prison for 6 years before finally parading him through. Rome in the triumph of 46 BCE, the GIC leader, once vigorous and commanding, had deteriorated during his captivity until he appeared as a broken figure. Before the Roman crowds, after the procession, he was led to the Teneum and executed. Jugurtha, king of Numidia, met a similarly brutal end following Marius's triumph in 104 BCE, according to ancient accounts. When he was lowered into the Teneum's lower chamber, the king went mad with terror. He was left to starve to death over 6 days, his cries echoing through the stone walls while Rome celebrated above. The historian Plutarch recorded his final words, reportedly asking in delirium how cold this Roman bath is. Simon Barrera, a leader of the Jewish revolt that ended with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, was displayed in Titus's triumph before being executed at the traditional site in the Forum. Josephus documented how the triumphal procession paused at the temple of Jupiter while messengers awaited word that the execution had been carried out. Only after confirmation of the enemy leader's death did the ceremonies conclude. Captive ruler faced immediate execution. The decision rested on the triumphant Gaunal and increasingly under the empire with the emperor himself. Some prisoners proved more valuable alive, serving as permanent symbols of Roman victory or as bargaining tools in future negotiations. But for those marked for death, the triumph offered only a temporary reprieve before the descent into the Tanum's darkness. The treatment of captured queens by Roman soldiers revealed how power operated in the ancient world. Legal systems that protected citizens evaporated at the boundary of conquest. Dignity afforded.